Okay, let's talk today about Iran, Venezuela, and Syria. And I mentioned yesterday that I want to discuss the Putin angle on the latest Iran stuff, but I also want to talk about it in the larger context. And there's a really good post about this on our subreddit, davidpakman.com/Reddit, which outlines sort of the underlying idea that I want to present to you here. And it's something I've been thinking about, thought about it over the weekend as the Iran news was breaking, and I've continued thinking about it. And the idea is that in the end, Donald Trump may be destined to stay out of Iran and stay out of Venezuela and ultimately stay out of Syria in any serious way, because staying out of those three countries shares a common thread, which is that it's in Vladimir Putin's and Russia's interests for the United States to stay out of those three countries. Now, I know that I have to issue this disclaimer. I hope we can be mature here, okay? This is not Putin is literally telling Trump what to do. Although who knows what they've talked about in private, we actually don't know. But it's the trend once again that in the end, when the rubber meets the road, Trump ends up taking the path that is in Russia's interests. And this is not about collusion or Trump criminality or anything like that. It's about geopolitical realities. It's about the realities of the dynamics that are forming, as I've talked to you about many times now, among the three major superpowers right now, the United States, China, and Russia, in a way that is not very good for the United States under Donald Trump. Iran, Venezuela, and Syria are three allies of Russia. And the trend in Donald Trump's presidency, it's not 100%, but it's a high percentage, is that in the end, rhetoric aside, Trump ends up acting in a way that protects or doesn't go against or threaten Russia's interests. And let's go through them one by one here. Trump does a big boy and he attacks Syria, except he attacked an empty runway at an airport after telling Russia that he was going to do it. And it was back up and running within a couple of days, if not more like hours. And so for all of the tough talk, Trump does effectively nothing. Now, this doesn't mean I want Trump intervening in Syria. What we're doing here is an analysis of how Trump's actions relate to Russia's interests, not me saying I want Trump to take A, B, or C action. That's Syria. Venezuela, number two. In the winter, as I told you last week, Donald Trump was looking very hard at going into Venezuela, forcing regime change. To be clear, I don't want him to do that. I'm glad that Donald Trump didn't do that. Don't email me saying I want Trump to intervene in Venezuela, because I don't. But last week I told you that there are some new reports from inside sources which say that Donald Trump simply got bored and sort of lost patience with the complexity of the entire Venezuela thing, which is totally believable. But once again, in the end, it favors Vladimir Putin. Putin and the Chavez Maduro regime are tight. We know that much of the change in Donald Trump's focus on Venezuela happened after a phone call with Vladimir Putin in early May. And once again, in the end, Donald Trump takes the path that, at least in the immediate, is the one that protects Russia's interests and favors Vladimir Putin. And then number three, we now have Iran. Yes, the bluster against Iran, the threats, the sanctions and threats of sanctions, backing out of the Iran deal, the entire thing we told you about yesterday, including Donald Trump authorizing a strike against Iran over the weekend, but then calling it off. Says it was over civilian casualty estimates, which may be true. But once again, Trump, despite the domineering rhetoric, ends up taking the action, or more accurately, not taking the action that favors Vladimir Putin and is in Russia's interests. So again, please don't make this out to be me saying anything other than what I'm actually saying. I am not saying Trump is personally colluding with Putin on these three foreign policy situations. I'm not alleging or pointing to some kind of conspiracy. I'm pointing out that in the end, Donald Trump is taking the paths here that Putin would want him to take. If you're concerned with what's in the United States' best interests, then you have to be concerned about the U.S. increasingly being in a weak position relative to the two other major superpowers, Russia and China, who, as I've told you before, are increasingly working together at the disadvantage of and exclusion of the United States. Now, maybe you don't care about that. I mean, there are people who, even though they might live in the United States, as most but not all of our audience does, who don't care if the United States is better or worse positioned. And they say, we're all humans. I don't care about country borders. And I don't care as long as we raise the overall well-being. That's my concern. I don't care what happens to the United States. Many of us, even on the left, who live in the United States are invested in the United States being a good place to live and a place that has a good standard of living and the relationships we would like to see with other countries. And so we do care about this. So please don't start with the, I must be a warmonger stuff because I'm criticizing Trump for not going into Iran, Syria, or Venezuela. I want Bashar al-Assad out for the sake of the Syrian people, but not at the hands of the United States. I think the United States needs to stay totally out of Venezuela. I do not want Donald Trump starting a war with Iran. This is not about me personally. These erratic maneuvers by Trump are odd, baiting Iran into action, pulling the U.S. out of the Iran deal, getting the opportunity to keep escalating, and then now last minute bailing on the escalation. If a Democratic president had done this, it would be every low-rent right-wing analyst on Fox News 24/7 talking about how weak Obama or Hillary or whoever was by virtue of taking the action that Donald Trump has taken. So my concern is the underlying geopolitical concerns that exist here. And number two, whether Donald Trump is actually in the end making the decisions that even he believes are in the best interests of the United States. I know that I wouldn't agree with his conclusions about what's best for the United States, but at least I would like to believe that in good faith, that's what his decisions are informed by, even if I would disagree with the conclusions. It's not clear that that's going on based on how at least these three situations are playing out in the end. Let me know your thinking about this. And if you're going to do the conspiratorial, allegations, don't even bother. I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to engage. But if you have a serious thought about what I've laid out here, I actually do want to hear from you.